Hi, thanks for joining us. This recording is hosted by the Michigan PTA to provide information regarding the school boards and the Open Meetings Act, which you'll often see referred to as OMA on future slides. The moderators today will be myself, Karen Meyer. I am the Norfolk Council of PTA Advocacy Chair. I am on the Michigan PTA Board. I'm the Federal Legislative Chair for the Michigan PTA, and I'm also on the Advocacy Committee.
And I'm Mike Testa. I'm from the Livonia PTA Council. I'm the Advocacy Chair. I'm the member of the Michigan PTA Advocacy Committee.
And we're very grateful to have Eric Walcott with us today. Eric, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Eric Walcott. I am a government community vitality specialist with MSU Extension. I'm typically based on campus in East Lansing, but do work statewide, doing educational programs related to state and local government. Do a lot of work with good governance, fiscal sustainability, and civic engagement, and deal with a lot of Open Meetings Act questions.
Well, we're having this Q&A today because as schools went virtual last year, so did the school board meetings, and there was a heightened increase in participation. As meetings are going back in person, we wanted to take this opportunity to learn more about how school board meetings operate.
Okay, I'll take the first question. School boards are a public body and therefore subject to the OMA. Eric, can you please describe what it means to be a public body in the OMA? Specifically, what is its intent or purpose?
Yeah, so first I'll start with just a quick disclaimer that I'm not an attorney. So responses here come from studying Open Meetings Act and years of working with local boards around the state. But if there are specific legal questions, best option there is to contact an attorney who does work with Open Meetings Act. But as to school boards and public body, a public body is defined in the Open Meetings Act as any governing body that's empowered by the state constitution, by state statute, or other means to exercise authority or perform a governmental function. So in the case of a school board, that would be to provide authority over school districts. And the primary purpose of the Open Meetings Act is to require public bodies to do their business in public. It's an effort towards requiring transparency for those public bodies by requiring deliberations and decisions to take place in public. And it gives the way a public to stay informed as to how decisions are made. There's also the requirement to allow for public comment, which offers a form of participation for the public, though it can be fairly limited. So it's often, we often say Open Meetings Act requires boards to hold their meetings in public rather than to hold meetings of the public.
Thank you.
What does the Open Meetings Act require for public notice of an upcoming school board meeting?
Yeah, so for regular meetings that are taking place in person, within 10 days after the first meeting of the year, public notice has to be posted stating the dates, times, places of regular meetings that are on that calendar for the rest of the year. It's typical for boards to post reminders of upcoming meetings, say a few days before the meeting. But for those regularly scheduled meetings, if it's the second Tuesday of every month or something like that, the legal requirement is that schedule is posted within 10 days after the first meeting of the year. For any time the schedule is changed, notice has to be posted within 3 days after that change is made. And if an upcoming meeting is rescheduled or a special meeting is called, that has to be posted at least 18 hours before the meeting takes place.
Does the OMA allow for a school board to hold a meeting virtually if a local government declares a state of emergency? And could the meeting be held in a hybrid format?
Yeah, so the Open Meetings Act was amended in 2020 to allow public bodies to hold electronic meetings due to a local state of emergency or state of disaster. Electronic meetings must be conducted in a way that permits two-way communication so that members of the public or of the public body can hear and be heard by other members. and also so that the public who are participating can hear members of the public body and be heard by members and other participants during public comment. As for a hybrid format, Open Meetings Act doesn't really comment directly on hybrid meetings, so it doesn't require them, but it certainly doesn't prohibit them. If a board wanted to hold an in-person meeting and allow the option of the public to connect electronically and participate, that would certainly be allowed.
Thank you.
Based on the current orders from MDHHS, what health and safety protocols need to be implemented for school boards to hold in-person meetings?
Yeah, so based on the current orders and on the revisions to the Open Meetings Act made last year, public bodies that hold in-person meetings have to comply with social distancing and other mitigation measures recommended by the CDC and by the orders that are in place through MDHHS. Related to mask wearing, is one of the big ones. And then currently there's the 50% capacity limit of the venue where the meeting is being held. Those are kind of the big ticket items in terms of what protocols have to be implemented currently.
Does the OMA require public comment at a school board meeting?
Yes, so OMA requires that public comment be made available at every public meeting. There's not much that's required in regard to that. The requirement is that, and I'm reading from the statute, a person must be permitted to address a meeting of a public body under rules established and recorded by the public body. So there's no legal requirement for how long a person must be required to speak or when during the meeting public comment must take place. The rule is just that public comment period must happen, and participants who are there from the public must have the opportunity to address the board.
Thank you.
Under the OMA, are school boards allowed to adopt policy and procedure for public comments? For example, can they allow public comments to be submitted in writing and read aloud at an in-person meeting?
Yeah, school boards and other public bodies can adopt rules for public comment as long as everyone has the opportunity to comment if they wish to. So if a board wanted every written comment to be read at an in-person meeting, they could certainly adopt rules that allow for that. Another fairly common one is imposing individual time limits for members of the public. It's fairly common to see boards limit each person to 2 or 3 minutes for public comment. And the board can also decide when public comment takes place. So often this means that public comment takes place at the beginning of the meeting, at the end of the meeting, sometimes both the beginning and the end. But there's no requirement that the public be allowed to address the public body during discussions on a particular issue, which I know for members of the public showing up to talk about an issue can be a frustration at times, but there's nothing in Open Meetings Act that requires that.
So can boards limit, you said some might say 3 minutes, some might say 2. Is there any specification about how long, a minimum of how long they're allowed to be able to speak, or no?
No, the law just says that they must be permitted to address the meeting under rules that are established by the public body. So that what that looks like is kind of up to the board.
What about putting a time constraint on public comment as a whole? Could they limit the whole thing to an hour, et cetera, or does everyone have the right to speak that wants to?
Yeah, so everyone, there can't be limits in terms of what the total amount of public comment is, because that rule in effect could prohibit someone from having the opportunity for public comment. Because if a board says, okay, we have 1 hour for public comment, and I'm waiting in line to comment, and it gets to the hour, and then they say, sorry, the hour is up, then they've violated Open Meetings Act. So they can limit an individual, and they can encourage, if a group is there to all speak on the same issue, they can certainly encourage groups to, identify one person to speak on behalf of a group. If they're trying to save time and keep meetings a little bit shorter, but they're not allowed to limit the total time period for public comment.
How can members of the public advocate to change their local school board for policy changes in regards to how they handle public comments at their meetings?
Yeah, so there's a few different options. Members could use their public comment time to advocate for changes. They could request meetings with members of the board outside of those public meetings. So maybe it's one-on-one, with a board member or with a couple of board members to advocate for rules changes related to that. The other option would be to pursue change at the state legislative level. Go to your state legislator or state senator and, encourage them to pursue an amendment to the Open Meetings Act.
Does the OMA require that materials shared or presented to the board during a meeting be available to the public? For instance, would they have to put it on the website?
Yeah, so as far as I know, Open Meetings Act only requires that the agenda be posted before the meeting and that the minutes be posted once those are adopted. It is common practice, and I would say it's probably best practice to make those materials available. So if there's materials that are being discussed during a meeting and those are contributing towards the deliberations and leading towards decisions, it's certainly best practice to make those available. But I don't believe that Open Meetings Act requires that.
Could you speak for a second about what you said about minutes being adopted? That would necessarily mean that the minutes wouldn't be available right after the meeting.
Right. So the minutes, they typically at the following board meeting is when the minutes from the previous meeting are adopted. Often what happens, and this varies, I'm sure, board to board, often sometime after the board meeting, there'll be a draft minutes will be posted. If the board is in practice of posting those online, they'll post draft minutes, and then once they're adopted at the next meeting, then they'll post the official meeting minutes from those previous meetings.
Regarding access to meetings, does the OMA require the school board to live stream or broadcast their meetings? Does the OMA require that a meeting be recorded and access to the recording be made available to the public?
Yeah, so for in-person meetings, there's no legal requirement to live stream or broadcast an in-person meeting. There's also no requirement to record or post the meeting recordings either. I will note that the Open Meetings Act says all meetings of the public body must be open to the public and must be held in a place available to the general public. So, there's certainly some things there about accessibility in terms of people being able to attend, but there's no requirement to record those or live stream and broadcast those.
What does the OMA require in regards to Americans with Disabilities Act?
Yeah, so going back to the last question, OMA requires that meetings be held in a place available to the general public, which should mean that those are accessible. And then specifically, actually, for electronic meetings, there are specific requirements that the public meeting notice that's posted must include instructions for how persons with disabilities may participate to enable them to be an active participant.
What is it about the OMA that allows for a large variance in how meetings are run between different school districts?
Yeah, so OMA sets the baseline requirements for public bodies to conduct meetings in public and allow that public comment. There's a wide range of latitude given beyond that for how different bodies carry out their meetings. And probably, if you went to 10 different school board meetings, you'd probably see 10 different variations on exactly how things are run. But yeah, so OMA really sets that bare minimum requirement. As long as those basic requirements of OMA are met, it's up to each board to set their own rules beyond that for what their meeting structure looks like, for what that public participation piece looks like, and anything else that they want to incorporate into their meetings.
What is the penalty for a school board if they violate the Open Meetings Act?
Yeah, so a public official who intentionally violates the Open Meetings Act may be guilty of a misdemeanor and could be personally liable for damages up to $500 for a single meeting. As for a public body as a whole, a decision made by a public body can be invalidated if an OMA violation is found. And then they would have to go back and adopt the decision again at a meeting that followed proper OMA procedures.
All right, well, thank you very much for all that information, Eric. If anybody has any questions about this recording or anything they want to ask as a follow-up, feel free to contact me at fedledgechair@michiganpta.org. You can also see the Michigan PTA website for more information and contact information for other board members, or you can call us at 734-975-9500. Again, we really want to thank you for joining us today, Eric. That was a lot of information I think is really important for our members to have. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.